Well, welcome back to Developing Through Change, and today we've got a really exciting episode. Today we've got Mark with us, Dan with us, and the world-renowned Arctic explorer. I can't believe he's here, really. We're bigging you up here, but Jim McNeill. Welcome, Jim.
Oh, God.
See, he's no pressure, Jim, at all, is there?
There's a height to fall.
So today we just wanted to really run through with Jim the incredible work you're doing, Jim, around the globe to evidence sort of what the world's going through and how we can improve it, and climate change and things, and also work out how we can learn from that for business leaders and people and bits and pieces. So if I hand over to you, do you want to explain a little bit what you have been doing and what you are doing?
How long have you got?
Go for it.
Well, I don't know. Well, let me start at the beginning.
Beginner's roles.
When I was 16 years old, I was a naughty boy at school. So my outlets were sport, which I was all right in, and I was the school practical joker. And my school was a state school, just turned state school from a grammar school, so it was still pomp and ceremony, and they wore flat caps and gowns and things like that, had prefects and goodness knows what. But I just thought it was great sport to do naughty things.
Cause chaos.
I was naughty, I wasn't nasty. In fact, I was the bloke that sorted out the bullies. But I think about fairness. I just can't stand it when I see people being unfair or unkind, for that matter. But anyway, I was bunking off from school, double maths lesson I think it was, in North London, which is where I was born and brought up. And I was in Barnet Park, staring down a long hill with teenage angst like you have, and I thought to myself, I was having these big thoughts like we do when we're that age, and I thought, why on earth are we here? Why are we here? Why do we exist? And I thought, Christ, what a question. But it occurred to me immediately that, hang on a second, I will never be able to answer that question.
No, you just won't.
It was like a brick in the face. I will never be able to answer that question. So what's the point in getting upset about it? What's the point in getting frustrated about it? So I said to myself, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to waste my time in that respect. What, can I put a point to life? Can I have a purpose? And there and then I decided that the only purpose that made any sense to me, quite a simple thinker really, is to make my life as worthwhile as possible. Sounds very religious and everything else and very corny, but that is where I resolved at 16 years old to make my life as worthwhile as possible.
And that's given you a hell of a journey though, hasn't it?
Has been, yes. Well,
it's still.
I start at the beginning there because it gives me license to have changed so many times. Gone from scientist to military to business, big business person, to firefighter, back down to firefighter again.
But with the firefighters, that's really interesting because you were part of the team for the Queen, was that? Did I read that?
Oh,
did you tell me that?
That's a long story. I was in 2 fire brigades. So I was fire officer for the Royal Household, looking after the assets of the country, basically, in the form of 7 royal palaces and all the gifts that the Queen had been given over the years, or the queens and kings. So millions of pounds worth in these barns and everything. So quite a responsible job. And I joined after Windsor Castle had a very big fire. I hasten to add.
Just after. Nothing to do.
But prior to that, I was in the local authority fire and rescue service, and that continued. So I was a road traffic accident specialist, so really on the sharp end. And I love that position for some reason, whereby it's your responsibility. If your team doesn't perform in that critical crisis situation, if I haven't trained that team to perform, or if I mess up my leadership of that team, then it's my fault. And I love that sort of responsibility.
So that sort of desire, you're putting sort of pressure on yourself, aren't you? So do you seek out experiences which give you that sharp sense of responsibility and pressure?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever sought them out. I think they've come. I love them. Yeah. So I mean, the Arctic is a great place. The polar regions are great places because I love watching novices come off the aircraft for the first time because, you know, it's all warm in the aircraft. They've probably stuffed their face. They've been sat down for 10 hours or whatever, and they come out. The first thing they do is breathe this -40, you know, and they cough. Their eyelids begin to, and they change from being all sort of hey, this is great, to shit, what am I doing? You know, this is dangerous. And they do realise very quickly that they're in a life-threatening situation.
And I don't think you can really understand, because I certainly can't, what -40 must feel like. Because I've never been anywhere near it. You know, it might be sort of -9 or -10, but -40 I think is a whole different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, one of the things I do with novices actually is make them, well, after I've trained them, of course, to make them make me a red hot cup of coffee or tea usually. Mm-hmm. It's less innocuous, and I throw it up in the air and it comes down as ice.
Yeah,
instantly. And they all go, wow. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite cold.
Do you see? So you know, you get these sort of newbies getting into this very, very different environment, which is so well out of their comfort zone. But do you see like a journey of these people coming into their own, and it you know, obviously the immediate thing is the threat of, it almost feels like that survival type thing, but do you ever see, and maybe you might see that in yourself, is that sort of your first few days out, is that, you know, it's hard, you're fighting yourself, you're transitioning from the world you inhabiting into this space. Is there a kind of point where you're not necessarily fighting against yourself and it, but actually you've gone through the eye of the needle to something else where you are, you know, with a part of the environment, and do you see that in yourself or in novices going on that journey?
Well, I'm a person that loves to do my homework to the nth degree.
Right.
Never did any homework at school at all whatsoever. Was always hauled over the coals. But in anything, you know, like training a team for extricating people in dire straits in a vehicle, I will know the nth degree about that vehicle if I can possibly do it or anything. So training is what it's all about, really. But you're right. I mean, Mother Nature puts this head of pressure on people immediately, and they think, "Wow, crikey, should I be here for a start?" A lot of them, and these are complete novices, by the way, mostly. And they're from all walks of life, all echelons of society. You can't pay me to come along and do my training. They have to raise the funds, and I teach them to raise the funds, and that's part of the struggle and the frustrations and all the embuggerances that you got to put up with, people lying to you and not coming up with the ACCAs and things like that. So that's a whole process in itself, but that's still civilized. But when you get them out in the cold weather, they first of all learn about themselves, which is fantastic to watch. It's so fulfilling for me because the whole process is cathartic, and it's empowering, and the reason for that is that there's no room for bluff, there's no room for nonsense, there's no room for petty politics, there's no room for, you know, getting one over on your mates.
I think that's something really that we could all learn from that, isn't there? About how you set the environment right to create that sort of atmosphere where you can grow like that. Because certainly, I mean, one of the things that's really interesting is those people that have come with you on this journey, they've chosen to be there, haven't they? They've opted in. Because I was really tempted to go with Jim one day. He said, "You've got to raise the money." I was like, "I'd rather pay for it." He said, "You can't. You have to raise the money." I was like, "I'm too busy." But I think one of the things that really struck out then was they've chosen, and certainly within our part of the industry, they're often given these challenges, these people, aren't they? They're pressed upon them. So how do you create that environment in that sort of way where you can say, actually, as a business leader, you might be able to recreate not that frozen ice bit, but that sort of atmosphere where you can let people grow? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Because it's a very similar thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the parallels are there. I mean, they're there very easily. I'll give you an example. So I trained the most senior police officers in the country, so it's their last course they can possibly do. It's called the Strategic Command course. And they put together all these assistant chief constables and chief constables and get them on this course. There's about 90 of them or something. And of course, by the time they've got up the ladder there, they're all backstabbing, political, nasty pieces of work, really, by and large. Might be.
Maybe. We'll put that with a caveat.
So, one of the things during my breaking down process, I gave them a tent, a 15-man tent, massive base camp tent, real proper job, 5,000 quid's worth. And I said, okay, I'm not going to tell you how to put this up, but you've got to put it up. And they made the worst hash of it you'd ever seen in your life. And in fact, they nearly came to blows. I had to intercede at one stage. But, I took them aside and said, well, what have you learned from this? You've got to go back to basics. Yeah. If you shout at that guy there, he's not going to do what you like. You're going to get his hackles up. He's going to, have a go at you. It's all going to be destructive and negative and everything else. So, yeah, I think you can draw these parallels. It's very difficult to, you can't emulate Mother Nature's pressure, but you'd be surprised. I mean, on Dartmoor here, it's relatively safe. You're never going to get into a life-threatening situation if you're with people that know what they're doing. And, you can simulate it easily by getting someone out there, getting them tired, cold, wet, hungry, and seeing whether they fight each other or look after each other.
And that's the key, because quite often under that pressure, your best friend can become your enemy quite quickly. It's really easy to become inherently frustrated, isn't it, if you're not thinking logically or whatever.
Yeah, frustrations come into it, but I think, once you reach a certain level, then they just disappear because they realise they're being prats themselves. Yeah.
So what you're saying is, you're talking, using an example of a cohort of people who, are political, used to that kind of environment, manoeuvring, and maybe trust is something which is not strong on that, and you're putting people into this kind of very uncertain situation where they have to learn very quickly that they need to ask for help, depend on others, and trust others, and cooperate. And I suppose your role in that is to sort of hold them in that space. And is that the kind of thing that you aim for?
Yes, I'm a terrible manipulator of people, basically.
But for all the right reasons.
If they're doing too well, then I'll put a spanner in the works somewhere or other, and I've got loads of spanners in my back pocket. If they're not doing so well, then I also intercede and get involved and try and support them, try and find out what's going wrong with their own processes, really, more than anything else. And I think, touch wood, I get through to them more often than I don't. Let's put it that way. And once you got through to them, once you realise, they've got potential that they probably don't realise they have. And it doesn't matter at what level you're talking at. These most senior people will have potential at that level that they haven't really reached into. And that's more psychological. More, intelligent dealing with people and what have you than other people perhaps, but there are levels.
I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because when you get to a certain level, it's very easy to become sort of channel-minded, isn't it? That you can't look outside of what your process is or what your pressure is, and outside might be all your answers. And I think that's where it comes to with you guys when you're in adventures, isn't it? You might be at -40 and not thinking straight, then you come along and see it a little bit, and the answer's right there all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very often simple.
Yeah.
Because life, when it gets tough, gets simple, in my humble opinion. What really matters, that's what you get faced with. I do quite a bit of performance training as well, and I've been lucky enough to do one of the national rugby teams, the Irish national rugby team, and they were giving away penalties all the time in the forwards, and losing because of it. And I said to them, right guys, how about a bit of integrity? How about you don't cheat? How about you don't put your hand on that ball and shift it somewhere, or you don't whack the guy in the nose just to put him off.
And I think it's about that, isn't it? About saying exactly how it is sometimes. Because so often we almost feel like we need permission to be honest, if you like, because they don't want to hear all this honesty, do they? Want to hear that they're going down the trajectory they're looking at. But that sometimes is dead end. And I've been in lots of situations where I have said, well, for me, you will come unstuck. They don't listen, then a year later, they're unstuck, It's about how do we create that environment, isn't there?
I think so. So I'm very interested about you are going on journeys over vast inhospitable expanses. And
on my own.
On his own, hasten to add.
Yeah, but on your own. But for me, this and it could work for sort of teams of people, because you can think about, through the centuries, capturing their ship in rough seas. You've got to look after the crew. You're not going to get there if you don't look after your team. But and of course, when you're on your own, you've got that self-reliance and self-resilience. But you've spoken a little bit about there is a goal, you're aiming for it, but actually there is that inner journey and a set of that often that is the goal. It's the inner work, which the environment is that kind of sort of crucible by which you can form yourself. And you speak to me about that learning from it.
That's exactly right. So they get to know about themselves, and the very next thing within a pressured environment like that, and I'm talking Mother Nature here at our worst, the next thing they get to know is that it's bloody unsafe. It's very, very life-threatening, and therefore how do they make it less life-threatening? And so the next thing they do is look around and they say, hang on a second, if I look after you, maybe you're going to look after me. Yeah. So the whole thing becomes a lovely microcosm of society. And people, are caring, they're kind. Before they shout their mouth off, they think, hang on a second, he's way bigger than me. In this pressurised environment, is he going to whack me one or whatever? Or, am I saying the wrong thing to a female? I mean, we're all male here, but, this exactly the same for females as well, apart from my wife, sorry.
Pass the head.
Yeah.
So developing that kind of almost that empathy. Which is
empathy, caring, kindness. These are words that we've lost in corporate society by and large. It's all, I'm going to win. Winning is the only thing that drives me insane. What is the only thing really that is important is your performance. Your performance. And it's only important to you. It's not important to anyone else. Because once you reach that, where you know where your level is, you know that everyone's frail and everyone has a bad day and is fallible. They make a mistake here and there, and so you have to have some leniency with a process. Then once you get to that level, then you can start improving your performance. And I say, I said I do my homework with polar stuff. I went to live with the Inuit for 3 months every year for God knows how many years before I ever did anything with anyone else, because I wanted to be the person that knew about it. And what the Inuit taught me was phenomenal.
You can't buy that probably.
But it wasn't always right.
Was it not?
Not for us, no. Interestingly enough, culturally they were so different that it just wouldn't work for us, particularly novices taking them out. So yeah, it's all, and these people, I stress to them, it's not about leaping over boundaries. It's about pushing the boundaries in a controlled
and understanding them, isn't it? Understanding what that limit is.
Exactly.
So how do you get over that being fragile? Because we're all really fragile, aren't we? Especially in modern age, we can sort of become offended by anything, can stump our toe and cry for an hour. In the locations you're talking about and you're on your own, there must have been times you felt very vulnerable and you had to overcome that. So what's the keys to doing that, really?
Well, I've nearly perished twice now. And I mean nearly perished. Came very, very close to perishing twice. 2 completely different situations. And I won't go into them now because they're too long.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to write the book, actually. But I think coming back to your question, which was I forgot.
But how we come over being so fragile,
Yeah,
almost anti-fragile, if you like.
It is that confidence. I call it the brutal honesty process. And another thing that I talk about is the walk tall syndrome. So these people, they've come off the street, all nations as well, and they're going through the learning process. You see them beginning to suffer, and you guide them in a way that they learn from the suffering. They learn that actually they can survive this ridiculous situation. You know, you've got nothing but a tent, a piece of canvas, well, it's not even canvas these days, piece of nylon between you and minus 40 degrees. It's serious, but you can do it. And once you realise that, then you build an inner strength. You build confidence. And it's confidence like you probably haven't witnessed before, because if you go back to the wife and 3 kids or whatever and say, hey, look, I did this, then you, or try, then you can't, because they don't appreciate what you've been through. So you can't really go back and do that. So it's not a boasting thing.
No.
And the point about brutal honesty is, I think if you're not brutally honest with your own capabilities, then you haven't reached that bar I was saying about. So I impress upon people to be brutally honest. If you've got a team, for example, you know, I was very proud, if proud's a good word, I'm not sure, of my team that, you know, did the road traffic accident in really bad situations where we probably did save lives, you know. And I was really proud if they did well. But there's always one thing that you can improve. And sometimes it didn't go well. So you've got to sit them down and say, right, okay, what went wrong? How are we going to improve next time? You know, and you know, let's resolve here and now that ain't ever going to happen again in our team.
So something really important, isn't it, about reflection and going into what's just happened and digging deep into the whys and hows to change it next time. I think that's often where we also let ourselves down in business, isn't it? Where a failure happen and you're so on it to go, right, I must fix this somehow, and you don't stop.
When Jim was saying also, the business environment can lead itself to one of competition. And as a result of competition, instead of the learning, you're almost trying to avoid the blame. So there isn't the safe environment to go, well, how do we improve next time? But I imagine in the reflections that you're running after a serious event, or you're trying to create the sort of space where people will actually inculcate that learning.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Do you know how I do that? Because I'm the first person who owns up if I do something wrong. And I literally lead them through that debrief. And if I've got a gift at all in life, it's a vivid imagination. So in training, I imagine all the terrible things that can go wrong. Myriad of nasty things. There's nothing I haven't thought about and dreamt about or whatever. So, you know, I'm a person who prepares for things, I suppose. Yeah.
Which is now, I mean, common part of high performance in sports teams or in any walk of life, isn't it? To do the preparation, to do the visualization, so that in the moment when it happens, you've got more time in your mind because you've walked through it.
Yeah, I think so. I'm very curious about it. So you talked about Inuit. You know, they've obviously over millennia developed a way of living, not just surviving, but a way of living in that environment. And you've taken new people from a different environment, and it is a survival situation because you're talking it's them against nature. They need to defend against it. But what you're saying is you equip them with enough that it's not just a in the present fight against life and death, although it can be, but actually it's a place where they can actually take notice, see what's around them, observe the situation, observe the people around them. And that's a very different place, but you need to equip people. You need to prepare, they need to be fit, they need to be mentally, whatever, you get them to that space, enable for them to actually get to that point. And I suppose it's that point when that light goes on, isn't it? That's the thing that you want, isn't it? Especially in the work you do in terms of getting people, citizens to become, global change makers.
Yeah. Yeah, and a great example of that is the tent. I come back to the tent. The tent is your shelter, the first line of survival in those sort of environments. If you can't shelter out of the wind, you are in trouble. So one of the milestones in training is for them as a team to put up that tent in all weathers. So I tell them we're not going out further into the field until you can do this as a team perfectly in the worst conditions. So I set that as an aim for them, and they just love it. They get a little bit competitive about how to do it, but it also breeds innovation.
Yeah.
Because I always learn something from these people. They'll always come up. If you set all these people thinking along the lines of, well, Jim says he hasn't got the answer necessarily. Can we improve on it? They don't often beat me, but they sometimes do it, and it's wonderful when they do. That's fantastic. Yeah.
I just asked, Mark was saying, I was almost going to challenge you a little bit, because I thought I heard earlier that you were saying it's the more extreme or difficult situation, or the closer to the edge, or the closer to true danger, where the maximum learning might emerge from. So yes, you can train to prevent that, but do you think the anti-fragility that might come, actually you can get more when somebody sees how close they were to maybe true danger?
Yeah, definitely, yes. Yeah, absolutely right. We adopt a scenario-based training, and one of the interesting things that happened on one occasion was that it was so real, someone took a bit of a wobble. So the scenario that we were playing out, I won't go into detail, but the scenario we were playing out, which was hypothermia, and the guy was in a terrible condition, actually started to happen to this chap psychologically.
Yeah.
He said, my hands are freezing, and he was a big Texan, and he said, my hands are freezing. Well, I felt his hands, they're boiling hot. It was psychologically, he'd adopted this critical crisis and was unprepared for it psychologically. So then, we went through it, and he calmed down and everything, and we went through the debrief thoroughly, with respect to how people respond, because you never know until you're in that situation. And he took it on as a real situation, and therefore really flustered.
Because you go out on your own and expose yourself to risk.
Thank you.
Do you get more learning when it's more dangerous?
So I think for me, I've just to reflect on the years I've done it. I used to when I was younger and lived on Dartmoor, and when the army were taking people off because of the bad weather, I used it as opportunities to go on. And they go,
As you do.
and because it was all about that training, but for me, that I was young, and for me it was about proving myself that I could conquer nature. And I got myself, not as probably anywhere near to death as you have, but I've had hypothermia a couple of times, and it's been very frightening. But I think for me that when you're in that moment of crisis, and I think with experience and with skill and with method to, that simplicity that that you need to work through it, you can get out of it. And you learn a lot from that. But for me, the survival situation, which is an existential thing, and the learning from that is different from the learning of, because the wilderness and the wilds are a wild place. But if you're not surviving in it, then it's a space for that kind of nourishment and prospering. So, and so I suppose the Inuit are people who do survive, but it's a place where they live and they prosper. It's a place where they learn, where they art takes place, and culture and community, and I suppose it's just a different learning, and I suppose it's that level of you don't always want to be in a survival situation, and I think it's really good learning. But for me, as I got older, I realised it's not about me conquering nature. It's about me learning to live within it as part of it, and that brings a different tone to it. And that's just from my experience, and it might be very different from yours.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, Mother Nature will take you out if she wants to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Full
No
stop.
messing around.
Yeah.
It takes quite a lot of courage, doesn't it, to sort of go and do the things that you do. And I think when you said about, and I've seen it, I follow you all the time. Like I said, people from all walks of life, they're completely naive to what they're walking into. And
I'm
that
trying
takes
to
its
tell them.
I'm trying to tell them. But I mean, it's the most amazing thing. I mean, when I've watched you over the years, Jim, I've followed what you've been doing a lot. And you see these people going in with you, and they all come out glowing, don't they? The pictures and the videos that I've seen afterwards. But I think the courage has to be there, and I think there's also a little bit of courage that when you're right on that edge and you are in trouble, to keep going is quite a lot. It takes a lot, doesn't it, in that moment?
Courage, really, for me, is having that fear. I'm not fearless by any stretch of the imagination. Not a lot makes me frightened, but I'm not fearless. Courage is the ability to step into that thing when there's fear about. So challenge the fear. It's taking that step.
I think that's the difference, isn't it, between surviving sometimes and not making it. Is having that, you're
Absolutely.
really in a dark place, you're freezing cold, you're tired, you're hungry. You've got to take one more step.
So I'll tell you one of the situations.
Come on.
Because that was exactly that. I was doing a massive expedition for the Canadian government on the potential for wildlife tourism and adventure tourism on the northeast coast of Baffin. And at the time, the northeast coast of Baffin Island, which is the fifth largest island in the country, in the world, was pretty unexplored apart from the Inuit. The Inuit knew it pretty well. But we didn't. We hadn't got a clue. So I was running up and down there, and I was vetting this Inuit as well, who had unfortunately a problem the year before with 4 American guests of his who perished in his care. So I was vetting him at the same time. Anyway, cut a long story short, we were out on the sea ice, 3 miles out, with a skidoo and a komatik, which is a sledge on the back. Myself and a mate I brought along, a mountaineering mate of mine, because we were going to go analyse all the mountains. And this huge heat wave came over. The sea ice began to break up almost immediately, but it melted on the top, which is quite unusual. And so there was a huge slush. So this woefully inappropriate snowmobile that this guide had chosen, underpowered and everything else, and kept breaking down, overheating, goodness knows what, was trying to dash for land in order that we didn't sink into the sea. And as he was doing so, the komatik has 2 great sort of horns that come up out of the sea, out of the base, and one of them got stuck on a great big lump of ice. So it just, like that, the snowmobile started digging down into the water, so he stopped the snowmobile. Berwin, my mountaineering mate on the other side, jumped off. I jumped off into slush up to here, and we pushed it in one direction so that the sledge could carry on. Berwin managed to get back onto the sledge, but I didn't. So by this time I was half a mile off of shore, and I was exhausted. At this stage, this is probably day 4 or 5, and his nutrition was terrible. We were eating nothing but pancakes and syrup, and a whole host of things that he was doing wrong. And we were terribly tired. But I had to get back to shore in slush. Now, I don't know if you've walked in snow, or snow's fine, but it's very difficult to walk in when it's deep. But slush is even worse, because it freezes various bits of your body as you try and do it.
Especially waist height, it'd be freezing bits, won't it?
Yeah. And it was just a nightmare. And I got as far as I could. And I was fit at the time. I was really, really fit. And I got as far as I could. And I was huffing and puffing, and I just sat down in this slush and thought the easiest thing I can do is just sit here. And then, without a word of a lie, I thought of my 2 kids that I had then. I've got 3 now.
Yeah.
2 kids. I thought of my home life, and I resolved to not die like that. I was going to die trying, and so my mind almost took over. That's what I think happened, and I resolved to do my best to make it. And I was just so lucky. I just made it just to the shoreline.
It's amazing what your body will do if your brain's out, isn't it?
It's incredible. The power of the brain I cannot stress. I don't know what the full power of the brain is, but I do know it's immensely powerful.
Yeah, and I've had a very similar thing. I coming down a mountain once, been hiking 14 hours, had no food, exhausted. I think it was -10. I think it's coming down Kilimanjaro actually, and I just stopped and I was like, I can't go anymore. And the guy went, move or die. And that's what he said. And all I could think was the same as you. My daughter's waiting for me.
Yeah.
My daughter's waiting for me. And I just remember walking for another 5 hours and staggering into camp and then collapsing. But you do it. You just keep moving, don't you?
You really understand what's in those moments, what is important to you.
Yeah, I think so.
Through that, recognising what's important gives you the strength to make that, big effort.
Yeah, I stopped being an adventurer when I was 22, when I had my first child, because I was up a mountain, 300 feet up on a sheer rock face. The heavens opened, and I was wearing, old-fashioned sticky rubber boots, which aren't sticky at all when it's wet, and you're on limestone, and this was in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do anything. We had to take our boots off, put our socks over our boots, put them back on again, and we abbed off, and we managed to make it. But I sat there as we were preparing, and I thought, I can't do this without having more justification.
Yeah.
I'm a responsible man now. I've got a new child. I've got a wife to look after, or a wife situation, and I can't do it. It has to be purposeful and worthwhile from now on.
And that leads me on to what you're doing now, because you've got a whole new thing you're just starting to do. Was it last year you started to do it? So you've gone from the North Pole or something. What was it? What was it? Tell me, Jim. It's been a while. I am struggling. To this ocean.
Ice Warrior was great. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was the hardest domain to start with. That's why I wanted to start with it. But it was always one of 5 domains. Those 5 domains, the wild places of the world, are the indicators of change before it happens in the conurbations or anywhere else.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start with the worst one. The worst one was Ice Warrior. So I was always going to do Ocean Warrior, which is what I launched in 2023.
Yeah.
But that's about getting a better, more immediate finger on the pulse of what's happening in the oceans and what's happening to our climate and our pollution and everything else.
But I just think it's incredible because, like you said, you are taking everyday people on these journeys and literally showing them, aren't you? And getting them to do some of the technical stuff and the learning. I mean, that comes with some incredible stories for their later life, doesn't it? And to say I was part of that movement.
Yeah, and we have a massive problem at the moment. People are fed up with hearing about climate this, climate that, up and down. This is good for the climate, that's not good for the climate. Oh, hang on a second, this is week 3, that's good for the climate, that's not good for the climate. We're fed up with it. And so my dream is to create this one dashboard that Joe Soap, Joe being male or female, in Tesco's, as they're going to do their washing, can go up to it, and if they've got a little kiddie, it's got a little polar bear in the corner of the screen, he can press the polar bear and realise that polar bear will actually outrun Usain Bolt in the first 40 metres. So you can't run away from him. Well, she goes up and she presses it a couple of more times, and it actually develops into a much bigger, more complicated scientific story. They're suffering from molybdenum poisoning off the west coast of Greenland, So that's what I'd love. I'd love to, first of all, engage ordinary, everyday people in actually doing something.
The science and the business.
That is real action. So the science, the citizen science bit. And secondly, reporting that in a near live capacity throughout the world. Then no one can dispute it. The data we gather I'm a stickler for data. The data we gather is what they call empirical data. It's indisputable, and it's what they use for calibrating any automated system for gathering data. So all the satellites rely on empirical data that we fetch, ground truthing the Americans call it, and we go and get it, and that calibrates, that validates the data it's picking up, and it means that when that data is shoved into a model, a mathematical model, it's going to be far more accurate when it comes out the other end than data that
we
you're
would
not
never
sure.
know that, would we? People like myself, you would never consider what you do is affecting satellites and different bits and pieces.
What I love, what I picked up there, and what I've read about your excellent work, is that having the citizen do it, because so much of this science is someone else's job. It's almost like you're disassociated with it. And actually, having citizens having some agency in this, all of a sudden, and so they have a legitimate view and be a participant rather than just a viewer. I love this idea of using the scientific precision and create validity. So it's not just a bunch of citizens collecting stuff which has no validity. This has real validity and needs to be taken notice of, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And I also like this by taking people out into nature, because so many people are so disconnected with it. How, unless you can actually feel it, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and whatever, is that how on earth are you going to value it? And so you're doing those three things, which are immensely powerful and hopefully the basis of some kind of social movement. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean that is what fulfills me. That is my driver, to use ordinary people, and I do use them. It's to train them to operate in these environments in the most safe way. As a leader, I come back to the responsibility. I want to know everything about these people, what makes them tick and everything else. So I know their name, I know what relationship problems they've had in the past and what they're going to have in the future or whatever. I know them intimately, and I feel it's my responsibility to guide them through this process very safely. But the reason for using them, and I tell them this at the beginning, is that when they become knowledgeable, when they become fired up about what is truth and what is not truth and what's bluff and greenwashing and everything else, when they've got a better view on things, they'll go back into their own communities. Their own community will gather around them, probably have done already, because they've had to raise money, they've had to go out, stand up and say they're doing this thing, anyone going to help me? So they go back into their own communities, and it's like a little spreading, I nearly said virus, that's the wrong thing, but it's a virus of goodness, if you like.
And I think that's one thing.
And knowledge and empowerment.
Yeah.
We as ordinary people, and I still think of myself as a completely ordinary person, we can do something about this.
And what I like about that, I mean, it just shows us a difference between the political nonsense that we get fed to, like you say, what is the truthful picture. And they are taking the true picture back. It's such a vast difference, I expect, isn't it, from what I could go on to BBC News now and look at, compared to what you'd come back with.
Yeah.
And that's really quite poor of us as a world, isn't it, that we're pumping this nonsense out.
We're sensationalists themselves, and that's the problem, really. I mean, if you look at that side of things, then that's sort of societal. Another massive problem we have is that everything's short-termism in terms of commerce and economies and everything else, and therefore how are we ever going to be, in the position of knowing what our finite resources are and staying within that boundary? We go around saying, I've got to grow. As a business, I've got to grow 3% at least, otherwise I'm not a business. Absolute, total tosh. How can everyone grow? You can't.
No.
But it's a whole paradigm change to get those people, everyone, to realise that that's the case. I always say, it's much bigger than politics. It's much more important than commerce. And actually, it's down to us as individuals to all rise, all say, look, I want to make my life worthwhile, perhaps.
we've talked, and you were just talking there about individuals, and then we move to society. I'm really interested in the work that I'm doing at the moment around, if I work with a variety of individuals and I support them to, I hope, become more anti-fragile. So I'll provide them with coaching so they can find the answers in themselves, not in extreme environments like yourself. But my main goal and where I get real motivation is when I can work with a group of individuals who are within an organisational context or within a system, because I'd love to research the effect on the system in terms of its ability to perform well when the individuals within it all have that kind of adaptability and that broader awareness of their own capability. They have the courage within themselves and other skills. It might have happened with the Irish rugby team, but you must have seen this where you have teams of individuals who have a mindset that's kind of maybe slightly more evolved because of what they've been through, and it has an effect on the whole. Is there any examples for you where you
Well, the Irish rugby team, it was really interesting psychologically, because the three-quarters who were in my day and in that day, it was only probably 10 years ago, they were sort of more lithe and more intelligence up here, where there's the big forwards, they get in, they bash each other's heads and everything else. So the three-quarters got it straight away. And they said, "Oh yeah, no, that's a really good idea, Jim." The forward said, "Feck off, we're not doing that. If I see a chance to cheat, I will." But fortunately, they got told off about it, and the coaches and everything took it on as well. So
I
they began
that's
to win.
the alignment of intention and what you are. Have the attention. So if you want to cheat, as your intention is to cheat, then your attention is simply on the cheating, getting away with it.
Yeah.
And that's where your energy goes, which is probably not a great way to get a high performing team.
No, not at all. And I don't go along with this winning is everything. As I said to you earlier, it's all about individual performance, and within a team structure, it's about your role, your defined role, and how that might adapt and adopt and change, within the scheme of things. So it's about pushing those limits,
and
not
doing it to
leaving
the
those.
absolute best that you can do it, and be willing to learn from. I think there's something quite powerful about, like, someone said, it's not always about, you don't always know, do you? You can, like, I think it was you at the beginning when you were saying, people do come in, they put the tents up and they teach you something, so you haven't gone in and said, I know all the answers.
No.
So you, even with your great experience, you can say, I'm still willing to learn.
I think it's immensely important, and this is a real problem these days as well, to be open. To be open about how you feel, how you think, to be open for people to come up and say, have you tried this, within a scheme of things. Leadership is about making the best of the situation. That is your number one.
Yeah.
It's not about you as an ego, as an entity. It's about getting that job done to the very best effect, in my book. And our leadership these days is just appalling. I mean, the politicians, I don't know how you can justify a person that's gone through college to become a politician in the first place, but that's by the by. Our politicians are driven by ego and getting into the limelight and sensationalism.
Yeah.
They're not good orators. No, if I could say. It's good, isn't it? Yeah. Orators. They're not good at speaking. If you listen to some of the old politicians, they just knock spots off them. Even if you don't agree with their politics, the Churchill speeches and things like that.
You'd be taken in.
Absolutely. The guy's there. He wholly believes what he's saying.
So having, obviously having conviction, having belief, and being honest. But you also talked about the open mind to other people's viewpoints and various other things, and having that vulnerability. Of course, the environment you're in needs to be able to appreciate and accept that, because if you're in a culture which doesn't have that and doesn't value it, if you show vulnerability, then someone's going to blame you or something like that. You're not going to use that mistake as an opportunity to learn and collaborate and help. So I'm trying to understand. You talked about, absolutely, and I totally agree with you about that leadership and about getting the job done. But you've also spoken about you almost stewarding the group dynamic and getting them to a point where that environment is that they can trust and rely on each other. And so would you say that as important, that kind of sort of shepherding, stewarding, guiding role in leadership?
Absolutely, yes. And that's why I train myself to know everything I possibly can about the task that I put my people through, if you like. So I should be the expert. But then I'm not going to stand up and say, I am the expert, because you can prove me wrong. And you will. At some stage, you will prove me wrong, because you will think of a better way of doing this. I'll be stuck in the mud. And maybe, with polar people, I always trained a team so that they could take over if I had a fit, if I went out. So, because, how could I not? They've got to survive. So they have to take over. So my leadership in a polar environment is particularly consultative. It's not hierarchical at all.
That's interesting, because you use the word expert, and I'm sure that you would the karmic boomerangs are called. You see an expert in something, they come back and hit you in the face straight away. I remember teaching safe act skills, and the first thing I did in front of the group was cut myself. So I can really understand that. But for me, I'm just sort of when we talk about expertise, there's sometimes an attachment of ego to that. And I was reading a book, and I can't remember who it was, but and the question's coming in a second. But
he's working on it.
Is this that a lot of they were looking through cause of death records and things like that, and they found a lot of people who were dying in whether they were doing extreme canoeing or mountaineering, whatever, were people who were very well experienced and considered them experts, and that lulled them into the position where they would take more risk that they felt that they could deal with it.
Yeah.
And I suppose that honesty and humility and check that ego around that. I'm the expert. I can do this.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to sort of check yourself, and in order, or do you think you take greater risks than maybe you should because you feel you're an expert?
I think I'm experienced. And I think I've always learnt from it, experiencing things or watching things and learning from that. Or, I never speak about anything I don't know about or feel as though I have some knowledge about, particularly when I do my keynote speeches. And I think that's a little bit refreshing, because if you regurgitate the 10 ways to be a great leader, then it's not the same as someone that's got a story for everything. And I probably have got a story for everything. And they're real stories, and they're not something I've invented.
And I think that, like you said, though, with you particularly, you've got this experience, but you also plan heavily for every eventuality. So before you go, you will. If I was coming with you, you'd know about me, you'd know about my daughter, my wife,
exactly,
what my failures are, and where my limits are, my perceived limits, because you'll probably try and push me further. But all that conjures up this way of you making sure it's managed safely.
Yeah. The BBC took me on to take their film crews out on Frozen Planet and Human Planet and everything else, and kit them out in the first instance and do the logistics and everything else. And then they asked me to do the safety planning. Right, so the BBC safety planning system, you can imagine it, can't you? Tomes of, you will do this, you will sit in that way, you won't cross your legs for too long or whatever. And so I only ever produced, I think, 15 pages with my longest risk assessment, because I sat everyone down in the briefing of those that were going to use this assessment, and I said, right, I want you all to read this and really think about it. Because quite literally this might save your life by you knowing what's here. and I'm going to sit you down on numerous occasions, or sidle up to you when you're having a cup of coffee and just say, wow, what do you think would happen if, the snowmobile broke down in the middle of nowhere, So, yeah, it is all about preparation. It's all about guiding these people through these things.
Well, I think we're going to have to sort of end up calling it a day now. We've been talking for nearly an hour, guys. And there's only so long our listeners will listen for. So I think I'd like to leave it to you to sum up, really, and tell us a little bit about your next mission, where they can find your details, and how they can get involved, if that's okay?
So Ocean Warriors, very simple, like me. It's about getting that empirical data from the oceans. So we're going to do it in a very environmentally friendly way. We're going to sail. So we've got sailing vessels. At the moment we've only got 2, but it's scalable very easily. And we want people to participate and learn how to sail at the same time and gather that data. We've got some of the leading scientists in the world on these yachts as well already, which is fantastic. So the scientific community, they've got a problem as well, and it's communications. So they're looking for proper ways of communicating, reaching people without all the fluff, nonsense, statistics and everything else. They're guilty of that as well to a large extent. So it's about that. It's about putting a better, more immediate, and that means that we're relaying this empirical, vital, critical data in a near live fashion into the high streets and broadcast it across the world as much as we can. And by doing that, we engage other people that say, oh, that might be a nice thing to do. I've never done anything like that. And they gather their stuff, they give me a ring, and I say, okay, we'll put you through a bit of training, and we'll put you on a boat, and you will help gather that vital data, and it's going to make you feel really good. And you'll get lifelong friends, and you'll get tremendous experiences, because these boats, by the way, are going to go out into high latitude areas that haven't been sampled before, which is so critical as well.
And from businesses who want to sponsor, there's a lot of exposure, isn't there, that comes around this. So if there is any business leaders out there who think actually I need some good exposure, that's really valuable to you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And to them.
I think we may have lost it in what we were talking about, but it's critical for me that anyone participating tells their story, warts and all, genuinely, honestly. This is what I've gone to, look, this is what I'm doing, that's the mistake I made, blah, blah, blah. But equally, the sponsors involved, why they're there.
Yeah.
Does it float their boat? Does it work for them? When I go into a sponsor pitch, and I guarantee a 6-to-1 return, that's because historically that's what I've done. Well, in fact, my return is more like 20-to-1 in terms of their return on their investment. But they've got to activate it. They've got to be a part of it. They've got to get out of it what they want. And unless they're willing to do that, I don't take them on, basically.
No, that's fair enough. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for your time. And anything for anybody else?
Well, I want to thank you and celebrate you helping ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So thank you.
Well, that's very kind of you, yeah. That's not why I do it.
But it's nice to be praised, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me.